the part. All right, I'll start now. So today's meeting is kind of a part two of yesterday's call that's also recorded, and you can watch that as well. That gave us a communications plan, and this is the implementation plan of this same work. So basically, this is work that's being used or being developed for the Oregon's Ocean Acidification and Hypoxia Council. And the goal is we do a lot of work on basically creating legislative reports, action plans on how we can mitigate ocean acidification and hypoxia in Oregon. But as most of us are scientists or scientists adjacent, we're probably not the best communicators. So OOST through House Bill 3114 created a funding opportunity. The Pathways got that contract to develop a way for us to be better communicators. And this is kind of teaching us how we can use that communication plan and implement it going forward. So with that, I'll hand it over to Nancy and she can get going for us.
Terrific. Okay. And I'm going to turn off my camera and you all are welcome to turn off yours. And I'm going to make all your faces go away. Sorry. So yeah, as Leaf said, this is continuation. This is part two of the communications plan. This is the implementation plan. We are recording this one just like we did yesterday. Those of you who were on yesterday may hear some repetition because it's important to set some context as we keep moving into the implementation plan. Remember that these two are companion pieces. So if you want to talk with somebody else about it, remind them to watch part one and part two. As I mentioned, so yesterday we did part one, the communication toolkit, which was about how we developed the messages, what was the process we went through to develop audience-specific and positive messages. We really want them to be positive, designed to inspire behavior change for each of those audiences that we chose. Part two, the implementation plan, which we'll be going through today, is presenting kind of a phased approach for implementing the communication toolkit. We're going to look at who's responsible, potentially, for implementing each step, suggested timeline, and talking about metrics, how you might evaluate effectiveness. So again, we're going to go through the goals of the communication plan. In the implementation plan, we've got a 5-step checklist to help you move through the process. We've got some recommendations for the council, who this is designed for, to help roll this out and how they can train messengers and get trained themselves. And then we'll finish with a sample presentation that I've put together. You can't laugh at me, to pretend as if I'm talking to one of the audiences. So I hope to model that for you. We will say this repeatedly. The full written document will be available on the OOST website, and also the 2 recordings will probably be on the OOST website as well as ODF or ODFW. Okay. As we went through the communication plan yesterday, I wanted to come back to the idea that we're trying to create civic readiness among Oregonians. The idea of that is you want to get people interested, having conversations, and getting involved. So when there are calls for action or legislation or potentially funding on the local, community, county, or state level, they are primed and ready to do this. Normally, when you're thinking about trying to do some behavior change, you would have something incredibly specific you want people to do. But in this, it's the broader aspect of civic readiness, getting them primed. The implementation plan has a 5-part checklist, which we are going to go through in more detail. Step 1, assembling your messengers. Who are the people that are going to be talking to you, or you are going to be talking to the public with? Step 2, identifying the metrics. We've got different audiences, different reasons we might be talking to them. How are we going to measure that success? Step 3, what's it going to take to train people to be messengers? Step 4, disseminating these messages, getting out in the field and talking with people. And then finally, step 5, evaluating your outcomes. Did you meet the goals that you had set at the beginning? First step, assembling messengers. So one thing to really think about is this is going to take a large group of people to go out and really talk with the public, talk with these target audiences. You can't do it just one person here, one person there. If you really want to create some change, we need to mobilize a small army of messengers. We want folks that are connected to the target audiences, but also folks that are kind of adjacent to them. The entire team of recruited messengers need to be well-versed with the communication plan. A thorough reading, group discussion about each section will permit everyone to familiarize themselves with the purpose and the content of the plan, clarify any questions or misunderstandings they may have, and build cohesiveness among team members as to their goals for implementing the plan. As we're recruiting people, thinking about audience selection, the core messages, the values, and kind of community-centered solutions, how are they connected to those things? Ensure that all key personnel are familiar with the audiences, going back to the characteristics of them, the ones that were identified through the systemic and inclusive process that Nettie discussed in part 1. Also, messengers or potential messengers reviewing the values of protection and responsible management. We talked about those yesterday, how they are ones that can cue people up to behavior change or getting involved. We want them to understand how these values resonate with these target audiences. So I know I keep going, go back to the communication plan. The team should review the process taken to create those core messages so they understand how we came up with these audience-specific messages. As you're looking at selecting messengers, and we're also using the phrase influencers, thinking about messengers, these would be folks that are professionals in the field. They're already concerned and can be trained to be effective communicators with one or more of the target audiences. There may also be a subset of folks that are influencers, possibly people that don't want to go out and do public talks, or they may not have the full background on that, but they're key community members, that they have the ability to draw attention to issues and promote to additional audiences. Think about people who do lots of social media posting, they're getting to a different audience, or, writing articles. So folks that may be in that arena. When you're thinking about the people that could be either messengers or influencers, think about some traits that you may want to see. Are they recognized community leaders? Are they people with an education experience or background? Are they people whose vocation overlaps with multiple target audiences? And have they been strong advocates within their local organizations? And really, in order to roll out these messages in an effective and really impactful manner, we need to cast the net wide. A large cadre of messengers are going to need to be recruited to make this happen. When you're thinking about communicating about ocean change, it was important for us to also look at, acknowledge, catalog some of the unique and key characteristics to Oregon itself. As a state, you have a pretty strong urban-rural divide, and that also has different points of view along a spectrum of liberal to conservative. There's the east versus west, valley versus coast kind of feel sometimes. As a state, you are actually blessed with a fairly small population that allows for some really close contact to legislators. You probably all know people that are in the legislation in some way or another. Oregonians love the outdoors. You have a pride in being outdoorsy, and that is a great thing to match up with that value of protection and responsible management. People in Oregon, for the most part, have a strong affinity to the coast. They've lived there most of their lives. They have lifelong memories, or if they're new residents, they're creating some lifelong memories. You also, bless you, because I come from a state where this is not the case, there's strong public access to all beaches, so the coast is an accessible resource for people. People have a desire to protect the ocean for the future. That's an important part of Oregon's identity. Also, a very important part of the identity is seafood as a livelihood and/or a family tradition. There has been a concerted effort to have collaboration and trust built between the academics and the harvest industry, and that's something to take advantage of. You're very nice in Oregon. You have an aversion to direct confrontation, but everyone desires to have a vote in everything. So thinking about this messaging campaign as a bottom-up approach. And finally, there is increasing respect and acknowledgement of tribal native cultures from the state, and thinking about how those are linked into some of this messaging also. During and after the April 2023 symposium, Pathways Collaborative met with individuals who represented a number of the key audience segments. We had some, and there, if you look at this chart, we've got the 4 major audiences with the harvest industry, seafood suppliers, restaurants, local hotels, and port and county commissioners. And then there's a constellation of other groups that were also involved throughout this process, through conversations, through interviews, providing input, providing feedback as we develop the communication plan. They really revealed a very strong network. And we know that these are also folks that have been interested, and these are folks that, once fully trained, could really reach and influence policymakers, which is ultimately a big goal of this project. Think about identifying strong partner organizations that can also improve the success of the targeted communities, particularly if it's a partner organization that's not on this chart, but has already been focused on these audiences from a slightly different direction. So think about this constellation as your pool of potential messengers. I will say it again, review the recorded communication plan. It's an important part of the messenger's training. Within the implementation plan, just to let you know, we've also put a projected kind of timeline for identifying, training, deploying, and evaluating the effectiveness of your messengers and the messages. Realistically, we put that at about a 12-month process, just to be fair to all of us. As someone is being considered for being a messenger, there's some kind of potential tasks that they may be involved in. And these are things to share with whoever you are talking with about being a messenger. And when I'm saying you talking, it's starting with the OAH Council and moving out from there. Messengers may be involved in a variety of tasks depending on their connections, their interests, and their time. They may be asked to train others as well as being trained themselves. They may be asked to do public presentations, going out to community gatherings. They may be asked to do legislative briefings, whether in person or helping to write material. They may be fact-checking content to make sure that the science is always correct. And you may also think about whether the messengers could be deployed as some kind of rapid response to newsworthy issues. If there's an opportunity that comes up and you go, this is a great time to talk about OAH, let's get out there and do it. Before I move on to step 2, do we have any questions that we need to share, Nettie?
Nothing has come up. Caitlin has added into the chat links to the previous presentation, and I posted the whole document again, so those are available.
Okay.
But I think we're
good.
Continue.
Okay. Moving on to step 2, identifying the metrics. Before you're going out and doing this messaging, you really do need to identify, here's the audience I'm talking to, what is it I am trying to accomplish with them? Determine the metrics specific for each of those audiences based on a specific intended outcome. And also then defining the success for each of those metrics. Once you have a particular metric, it's important to articulate what it means. What will success look like? I'm sure we've all had these conversations when you're at work and someone says, I want to do this. And you're like, well, how's that going to look? The team should consider what's reasonable within an expected time frame and resources and local actions that can happen. Success should be defined around measurable data used to determine the achievements in your communication efforts. For example, if your overarching metric is you want to reduce carbon output, then what are some of the ways you would want a specific audience to talk about it? Is it that we're trying to get port commissioners involved in legislation to reward low carbon businesses? Or are you trying to get quarterly information meetings with commissioners? Or is it that you want port commissioners trained so they too can be messengers? Being very specific about what it is you're trying to do with each of the audiences is going to be important. These are some broad categories for kind of around civic action. Local government, which is the port commissioners. If a broad civic action is increased community conversations and understanding of OAH through public meetings, trade association meetings, community group, training workshops, media appearances. What would that look like? How would we get to that? If you're working with the seafood suppliers and restaurants, and the whole idea for that action is really to reduce carbon footprint in their environment, what would that look like? Does that mean having a fleet of delivery vehicles that are low emissions? Helping to try and define what that would look like, rather than leaving it up to your audience to try and figure it all out on their own. If you're talking about commercial fisheries and the harvest industry, becoming an active citizen by following any and all legislative discussions, environmental reviews, coastal permitting. Myself, I would love to see a state grant to help, I don't know, refurbish ships with lower emission engines, but I don't know if that's possible. Finally, civic action may be around tourism and hospitality industry. And again, remember, these are our 4 focus audiences that we came up through the process, through the communication plan. So tourism and hospitality industry. Asking them to focus on economic indicators to track the impact of OAH on Oregon-specific businesses. What would that look like? What are they already doing? So thinking about those pieces. Already on step 3, which is training the messengers. First thing is conducting training for the messengers on effective science communications. This communication plan is how to be a good communicator. There are many, many resources on effective science communication also, particularly starting with the OOST website, Oregon Ocean Science Trust website. And you probably all have resources that are available to you that give you the strong science background. After everyone has received their basic training on science communication and the OAH communication, it's important to allow your messengers time and space to rehearse their messages. It takes time, it takes practice. You need to do it out loud. You can't just read it on your screen. And it's important to do it with a friendly audience at first, so you can become fluent with the phrasing, how it feels when you're talking about it, how to connect with an audience's values, and how to engage them in a productive conversation about ocean acidification and hypoxia. People that have been trained as messengers are going to experience their own learning curve to build confidence in communicating the information. Please know it is important and expected to make mistakes, feel like you're stumbling during this period of practice. Repetition is necessary in order to develop fluency in developing the message effectively. Repetition is important. Did I say repetition was important? I did. Repetition is important. We talked about this yesterday. This is the core 3-part format for the messaging that we are recommending applied to any of the target audience. And again, this is kind of the skeletal piece of it. You will be building outside of it or filling it in. Starting with an audience-specific value. And yesterday we talked about responsible management and protection. Explaining OAH using that core message that was developed with public input. And then ending your talk with them about community-based solutions. What is it that they as a community can do, and how can you help them get there? So for instance, if we were looking at the general public, possibly saying for the first part, we must protect the Oregon coast from being harmed by the issues facing our environment. Then we have the core message about what OAH is. And once they've got that, going to our community-based solution ideas. Let's be vigilant in safeguarding our coastal habitats and the Oregonians whose livelihoods depend on them. What are some ways you can help safeguard our coasts? Remember, these are the public tested messages, the ones that we worked with the public. We asked them to help us figure out, how do you explain ocean acidification to someone without a strong science background? We asked them actually, we gave them sentences and asked them to put them together as if they were doing a presentation to 4th graders, which we know have the attention span of about 2 to 3 minutes to engage in a topic. We described this process in presentation 1, so if you did not see that, I suggest you go back. Remember that this message is not intended to explain the chemistry of ocean change. Rather, it is a 60-second introduction and overview of the issue. The best time to really dive into the complex science is when the listener has become engaged and is asking for more information. So the public tested message for ocean acidification, and you guys should all practice this, not while I'm doing this now, but at home. Oregon's ocean is changing, and many species have already shown signs of distress. Just as humans need calciums to build their bones, sea creatures need calcium carbonate to build strong skeletons and shells. The ocean absorbs a lot of carbon dioxide, which is changing the ocean's chemistry and prevents the development of calcium carbonate. This is called ocean acidification. As a result of the changing chemistry, we are seeing sea creatures, skeletons, and shells becoming thinner and more brittle. Climate change is also the cause of hypoxia, as warmer water holds less oxygen. As the Pacific Ocean warms, its ability to hold a lot of oxygen declines. The term hypoxia refers to low or depleted oxygen in a body of water. Because most organisms need oxygen to live, few organisms can survive in a hypoxic condition. Local actions will lead to a brighter future for the ocean, its species, and the communities that depend on them. So again, once again, this is not about giving them all of the science behind it. It's essentially, I like to say, creating some Velcro that you've hooked them into the topic and they go, I want to know more. Tell me a little bit more about this. What does this mean when you say the carbon where's that carbon coming from? That's when you can really fill in a lot more of the details, which start leading people to some actions. Just to go through our 4 major audiences that were identified through the process. First group is commercial fisheries and harvest industry. Our value, we must protect Oregon's fishermen and shellfish harvesters from being harmed by the effects of ocean acidification and hypoxia. Then you would go to that core message and hook them in with protecting our harvest industry means actively eliminating or reducing the risk of ocean acidification or hypoxia. Our second audience would be port and county commissioners. And I will just say, from being from the East Coast, it's an interesting system of port and county commissioners out there, which I understand are not necessarily party affiliated, but they are in charge of their port area. So taking practical common sense steps, responsible management to address ocean acidification and hypoxia is in the best interest for future generations. Then your core message, practical, feasible step-by-step approaches allow us to make real progress on longstanding challenges with ocean acidification and hypoxia. Our next group would be the seafood suppliers and the restaurants, starting with the value of protection. We must protect Oregon's beloved seafood restaurants from being harmed by ocean acidification and hypoxia. Go to the core message, and then your activation at the end, showing concern for the welfare of seafood suppliers. It's the right thing to do. Again, that responsible management is a value that you want to queue up for people. And our last audience in the targeted group is the tourism and hospitality industry. And I want to tell you a little bit specifically about them. We looked at that as the smaller, independent hotels and hospitality industry along the coast, not chains, big chains, because we think they have their own systems that we may not be able to break into. So working with the smaller ones, which are already the boutique ones that are attracting people that love ecotourism, that love those small, intimate locations. We all want to enjoy Oregon's beautiful coast today and for many tomorrows to come. Taking practical, common sense steps to address ocean acidification and hypoxia is in the best interest for future generations. So that value of protection. The core message in the center of your presentation, and then winding it up with, future generations depend on the decisions and plans we make today. And maybe leading into what else could we do, or what are you already doing? So I'm going to make a few recommendations for training messengers that come from the process that we've gone through and some experience that we've all had. Realizing that many of the messengers that you are going to bring into this process have a very strong background in the science of OAH is an incredibly positive attribute. Encourage your messengers to bring their passion and describe any research they're involved in. Bring that science to life. There, as you all know in your field, I mean, there's a lot of misunderstandings about what scientists do. You can help add a face to that. Taking that science information and adding the communication and social science recommendations that have been described in the communication plan are going to make these messengers even more effective with their presentations, because realize that you're talking to fairly non-science audiences. Know your audience. We've got information in the communication plan, but it's always good to keep doing more research. Know what's important to them, their values, what are their challenges, maybe even trying to figure out where they are on that Six Americas scale that we talked about yesterday. You can meet people where they are, not where you think they should be. This is often a hard part for us in the communication field, because you're like, I want them right here. But you have to remember, as Nettie was saying in yesterday's presentation, step back, step back, step back, so you can see where they are right now. And sometimes it's really better to listen than talk. Don't be afraid of asking open-ended questions. There aren't always hard and fast answers, particularly in this field. Let your audience share their answers, which are going to come from their perspective and their life experience. They also own that information, and when it comes to doing problem-solving discussions, they would own the solutions. Some kind of open-ended questions that might be helpful. When you talk to your family or friends about your work and your hope for the future change, what actions do you focus on most? That would generate some really interesting answers from whatever audience you're talking to. Then delving in a little bit, thinking about a time when you talked with someone about ocean change, or whatever phrase you want to use in there, and it did not feel like a productive conversation. What made it feel difficult or unproductive? Getting people to help identify what happened in the conversation. At what point did it seem to turn? And then what are some examples of things that you've seen others do in response to ocean change that are really making a difference? Getting some information from your audience. They may be that we found when we were doing the public testing, people know a lot more than we sometimes give them credit for. So giving them a chance to tell you what they're doing or what they've seen and what they think is making a difference is a great way to get some conversation going. When we're doing talks from the scientific point of view, we just need to remember to use statistics and data sparingly. We don't want to get trapped in the technical information up front that will make people's eyes glaze over. In the case of climate change, ocean acidification, hypoxia, solutions are hard. If we had them, we would have done them already. So we have to be open to an exchange of ideas. Also getting people to think about the fact that solutions need to match the scale of the problem. Try to avoid single person action answers, or kind of the one and done mentality, like, I recycled aluminum cans today, I've done everything I can for the environment. You could probably do more. And if you're talking about ocean acidification, it's a bigger thing. That's why we tend to focus on community-based solutions versus single person actions. When you're building your messages out, find a case study or two of a local solution that you want to share. Whether it's a case study of something that's already happened, it's ongoing, or maybe it's just information. There are case studies that you can share with people, things from their region, or it may be something from another part of the country. Encourage community leadership from all angles, not just the typical leaders. The people that are already in leadership roles in an organization may have very full plates, as I will attest to for the council members. Where are other community leaders? Where are other speakers who could pitch in and rise up to be leaders? Be clear about why you're here talking with them, that it's an important issue because you're impacted by the issue and they're impacted by the issue. You won't know until you start asking them, but they may already feel the effects. They may be frustrated or confused. They don't know what to do, so they may be looking for some guidance here. Once you've gone out and done a presentation with a group, follow through with that group after you leave. You've started a conversation that needs to continue. This is an ongoing process. And going back to that concept of creating civic readiness means that you're going to have your fingers on the pulse of what's happening legislatively, and you can share sources with them that they should keep checking. Okay, anything that I need to slow down for, Nettie?
There's a great question from Heather. She noted that in our implementation plan, we are suggesting assembling and identifying our messengers before identifying metrics and goals. And she wondered kind of about that. I think my response, and you can add to it, Nance, is I can see what you're saying, Heather, about maybe you would want to have a specific metric and then choose your audience based on that. We kind of were working from the other direction, starting with our audiences, then wanting to make sure that the metrics were really specific to them. If that makes sense. But Nancy, do you have other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. You could do it either way. I mean, if your goal is, here is a very specific behavior that I want to change. Now, who are the audiences that do that behavior, and then go out that way? This process that we went through was, let's look at all the potential audiences. Who are the key ones that we believe could ultimately be good spokespeople, not only to their audience, but also potentially up to legislation. So that was the directive that we had.
And so she's now asking, she said, I mean, identifying messengers. Oh, messengers before audiences. Sorry, I maybe bungled your original question there, Heather.
But we gave you great information anyway.
Now you know.
Thank you, Nettie. I'm just thinking back to that slide that you guys had, and it was identifying metrics, but I think it was on that slide that audiences were introduced as well, which I think is different from what you mean by identifying your messengers, right? So like messengers is different from audience. And it seems that you guys are saying identify your messengers before your audience. And that's where I found it interesting.
Yeah, I think the messengers, it does get a little boggly. The original request in the work was to develop this for the OAH Council to be the messengers. And I think as we went through this process, we realized it had to be a broader group of people. And as we talk about messengers, we often refer to them as part of, getting messengers from within the key audiences. So that may be why it's getting boggled back and forth.
That makes sense. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, if it makes sense to you, then you win.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're on step 4 already, disseminating the messages. So we've got people trained. We're ready to go out and do these messages. So let's get out there in the community. And again, we need a small army of people to go out and do this, because one person doing one talk every week is not going to move the needle. This needs to be a commitment, and a team effort to go out and talk with as many people as possible. And I know I keep saying talking with them, because it really does make a huge difference. Face-to-face conversations, going to where people are to have those conversations versus, writing a newsletter or posting something on a social media page. They just putting it out on a website. It does not get the same kind of impact. You go to people, you hear what they have to say. You are right there in their association, their meeting place, their community gathering area. So you have come to them to say, here's what I want to talk with you about, and how can we work on this together? And also checking in with each other. Are we being consistent? Do we have good ongoing messaging through other existing communication channels? When we met with folks last April from the target audiences, they really shared with us, these are some existing communication channels that are already out there. You don't need to make up new ones all the time. You can build right into them. There's a copy of this full chart in the written plan, in the communication plan. We suggest that it's best to use existing plans. The folks that we talked to also from the targeted audiences did have some ideas of some other ways to reach out to folks in their group, making a 2 to 3 minute video to share, doing a one-pager that you can leave with folks. There were concepts of, I think we've all checked into a hotel where they've got some video playing on the TV. Do you do something there? So there were some suggestions about some additional ones, but also, again, go back to how are these groups already communicating with each other? How can you build into that and become part of that? Step 5, the implementation checklist. So now we're evaluating our outcomes, assessing our specific metrics. So we would have to go back to step 2, which is, what are those outcomes? What did we say we wanted to do with each of these target audiences? What was a time frame that we had set for meeting these goals? And then go back and assess those metrics. It's really hard without knowing what the metrics are to recommend specific evaluation instruments. But there are things that you could do on a short-term level, pulse surveys. Are people, getting what you're talking about? Self-assessment by the messengers. How did they feel about it? There's also things that are pre and post questionnaires you can do with audiences where you give them a statement and you ask them to kind of compare for themselves. How did I feel before I came to this presentation, and how do I feel now? So they are giving you an assessment of how they believe they have changed. And realize that there are, in the evaluation field in social sciences, when you're measuring people's intent, it is a fairly good metric of their actual action that they believe they're going to do. Once they've made an intention, once they've said, I'm going to go off and do this action, or they've signed a board, a pledge, done something like that, they're much more likely to do it. Ultimately, let's survey the policymakers to see if they're getting some more conversations. Are they feeling like they get support for things that they've suggested about reducing OAH? Do they feel like they're getting more pressure to introduce actions to reduce OAH? So I am going to launch into a sample presentation to a potential key audience. Some of the things that you would want to cover in your talk, and these are not necessarily in specific order, but why are we talking to you? Understanding their professional role and your professional role. How are you guys both impacted by OAH? And how can this audience use their voice to reach legislators? That would be an ultimate goal. Helping them activate civic readiness within their professional colleagues. Going through some of the basics of OAH and more depending on the audience. And then having some open discussions about how are these issues impacting your field or livelihood? Who's working on these things? And what actions can be done, have been done so far, and what else can we do? So you will note that there are little blue thought bubbles in the presentation. And what I will do is, if you can bear with me, I will do the presentation and I will stop at each slide and hit the pop-up note to remind you what part of the implementation plan, what part of the communication plan is this linked to. Maybe I'll change my voice a little as I do it. So good morning, and thank you for inviting me to speak at your quarterly gathering. I've had many conversations with Erica, who's your association director, and we realized it was important for me to come and talk with you all in person. I'm here representing the Ocean Acidification and Hypoxia Council, which I know is a big title, and it's a governor-appointed group of scientists and nonprofits that are concerned with the current and future impact of ocean health. Your work in tourism and the hospitality industry, especially along the coast, has been impacted by this issue. And we really want to talk with you about the challenges and potential solutions. Speaker's note, be clear about why you're talking with them, because they are impacted by the issue. They may already be feeling the effects and frustrated. So when you walk in the door, the question is, who are you? Well, I'm here on behalf of the OAH Council. However, my roots in Oregon began long ago. My job brought me here 20 years ago, and I fell in love with the rugged beauty of this state, as well as the resilient spirit of Oregonians. I'm lucky enough to do research on ocean health issues, which brings me to you today. Speaker's note, tell the audience about yourself. Let them bond with you, your journey, your relationship with the state. You are one of them, so how you relate to the natural resources. We all want to enjoy Oregon's beautiful coast today and for many tomorrows to come. Taking practical common sense steps to address ocean acidification and hypoxia is in the best interest for future generations. Speaker note, start with a value that resonates with the audience. In this case, it's protection. It's really evident that you, in this association, care by looking at your website, the ACVO website. You have an entire column, Be Kind to the Coast, with a great drop-down menu and some wonderful behaviors that you are recommending. Devoting an entire section on environmental sensitivity really sets a strong tone for what you want visitors to expect when they come to your website and when they come to the coast. Speaker's note, know your audience, their values, their challenges, maybe where they are on the Six Americas scale, and what they're already doing. So I'd like to ask a question to the group that's here today. When you talk to your family or friends about your work and your hope for the futures, what aspects do you focus on most? At this point, I would break them into small discussion groups, or depending on the size of the group, I would have them just calling out answers. Speaker's note, don't be afraid of asking open-ended questions. Let your audience share their answers, which comes from their perspective and their experience. I heard a lot of answers that were about the environment, the health of the people, the health of the animals, and the health of our state. Well, the OAH Council agrees, and we're all facing a bit of a challenge. Oregon's ocean is changing, and many species have already shown signs of distress. Just as humans need calcium to build their bones, sea creatures need calcium carbonate to build strong skeletons and shells. The ocean absorbs a lot of carbon dioxide, which is changing the ocean's chemistry, and it prevents the development of calcium carbonate. This is what's called ocean acidification. As a result of the changing chemistry, we're seeing sea creature skeletons and shells become thinner or more brittle. Speaker's note, using that public-generated explanation of ocean acidification is that middle part of the sandwich of the presentation. Climate change is also the cause of hypoxia, as warmer waters hold less oxygen. As the Pacific Ocean warms, its ability to hold a lot of oxygen declines. The term hypoxia refers to low or depleted oxygen in a body of water. Because many organisms need oxygen to live, few organisms can survive in hypoxic conditions. Local actions will lead to a brighter future for the ocean, its species, and the communities that depend on them. Speaker's note, again, using the public-generated explanation of hypoxia. We've got the ocean acidification one and the hypoxia one. They go together. You probably have seen some examples of impact from ocean acidification and hypoxia that you in the hospitality industry may be familiar with. For instance, changes in seafood availability, that when you're recommending restaurants to people and you find that something's not available anymore. Understanding there's limitations on commercial fisheries, and seeing limitations on recreational fisheries that some of your guests may want to be involved in. Speaker's note, customized to make relevant to each audience. What are some impacts that they may be seeing from their point of view? Look, I'm Leaf. My interest in this topic is personal, and it's directly linked to my research. I've studied the ocean and marine system for over 20 years. My studies on regional shellfish populations took a really dramatic turn in 2007, when we observed that their shells were not strong enough to protect them. It appeared they weren't taking in enough calcium carbonate, which, as we said, is a major component of their shells. The increased carbon in the atmosphere was being absorbed by the ocean. It was changing its chemistry and slowing the growth of these animals. I am still studying the effects of this nearly 17 years later. Speaker's note, encourage your messengers to bring their passion, their science and describe the research they're involved in, help personalize what the science is. It's not just scientists who are concerned or impacted by these issues. There's a whole constellation of Oregonians that have recognized that we're all in this together. Through various networks, they have the capacity to reach larger groups across the state. By sharing personal stories and concerns, all of the people in this chart can help start conversations, much like we're starting one today. Speaker's note: there are many sectors being impacted by ocean acidification and hypoxia. Getting everyone focused and talking about it is a really important step. So the question is, are Oregonians really talking about climate change? Well, it really varies from region to region across the state. There is a study that's been a long-term one called the Six Americas Study, which if you want to geek out and look at their website, there's tons of ways you can sort it. You can look at your county, you can look at your town to try and figure out all of these questions. And there is one question about how many people discuss global warming, climate change, which is related to ocean acidification and hypoxia. How often are they talking about it? And they're talking about it some, but they can always talk about it some more. We know when it comes to talking about ocean change, Oregon is really special. We know our state has an urban-rural divide and the points of view along a spectrum of liberal to conservative. There's a bit of an east-west valley coast. We all live through it. What is nice, though, is that our state has a really small relative population, which allows for close contact to each other, to our legislators, so we can make things happen. In Oregon, we love the outdoors. It's a great state. We have pride in being outdoorsy. And we love our coast. You all know that from your work in hospitality all along the coast. People are creating lifelong memories, or they're sharing lifelong memories with you from when they were a child and brought their grandchildren. We want them to continue to have those memories. Oregon also has a wonderful process of keeping the beaches publicly accessible. That is something we don't want to lose, but it means everyone can see what's going on with the changes in the ocean, the coastline. Oregonians probably also desire to protect the ocean for the future because it's part of who we are. We also know that seafood is part of who we are. It's been an important livelihood, a family tradition. These are all important parts when you are trying to talk with our neighbors about ocean change. What's been really good to see over the past decade is a great collaboration and trust building between the scientific, the academic community, which I'm in, and the harvest industry. So we can share information, we can work together to track what's going on and to share what's going on. We're really nice in Oregon. We don't want to have direct confrontation, but we really do want to have a voice in things. So you know from the conversations that you have with people when they're checking into your hotels, when they are checking out of your restaurants or wherever, they all want to have a voice in what's going on. So thinking about all of these conversations, helping to build a stronger voice. We are acknowledging and increasing respect for our tribal and native cultures. There's probably a lot we can learn if we can just listen more. No matter where you live in the state, starting conversations like the one we're having today can really help create some civic readiness among Oregonians. And what do I mean by civic readiness? Possessing the skills, the fierce desire, we really want you to feel interested and following this, desire to respond to calls that may come up for action or for legislation or for funding, whether we're talking about the local, the community, the county, or the state level. Actions will need to happen, and we all need to be ready to help make them happen. Speaker's note, trying to create civic readiness means you are also going to help them know what legislation to follow. All of these conversations that we're tapping into, all these ones we want to start out for folks, can tap into a really important value for all of us, the value of protection. We have a duty to safeguard the well-being of the people and the places here in Oregon. We have to protect and preserve the habitats and the ecosystems that we depend on. In your field, in the hospitality industry, these are vital. They are what you are helping to sell for our state. You know that also protection is showing concern for others. It's the right thing for us to do. Protection is stepping in to ensure people's safety and well-being. And protection is also about let's take measures to eliminate or reduce risks, whether it's for people, animals, or the ecosystem. When we're thinking about protection, we're also thinking about being vigilant and shielding our people and our places from harm. So I want to ask the group another question here. So what are some examples of things you've seen your profession, the hospitality industry, do in response to environmental or ocean changes that really seem to be making a difference? Again, I would, speaker's note, find a case study or two, a local solution to share. This may be something where you would, depending on the size of the group, divide them into some discussion groups, or if it's a smaller group, just calling out answers. We've got some ideas. What might be some actions for the tourism and hospitality industry to address ocean acidification, but these are just ideas. None of them are set in stone. We just want to toss them out here to you all. For instance, do you guys want to focus on economic indicators which track the impact of OAH on Oregon-specific businesses? Specifically, you guys, how is OAH impacting your field? Maybe there's some very specific actions. And again, these are just ideas. The development and adoption of a tourism green practices along coastal locations. And I think, if I'm correct, Erica told me that there's already some work being done on creating some green practices certification, which is a great thing. There are many folks that come to your locations who are looking for some kind of extra strength from you, extra commitment to the location where you are. Maybe another specific action might be creating citizen science weekends. Are there packages that could encourage city dwellers to become personally involved in water quality testing over here on the coast? I'd love to break the audience up here into some small groups to do some discussions and think about what kind of solutions might work right here on the Oregon coast. What would need to happen in order to get these to happen, and who would need to be involved? Speaker's note, solutions are hard. Being open to an exchange of ideas, getting people's input, they need to match the scale of the problem. So giving folks time to have these conversations among themselves. When you're thinking about solutions, you can kind of think of them in 3 different ways. Kind of collective ones, how are we all working together? Local ones, are there things we're doing to make things more efficient just within our location? And then are we talking about it? Talking about it is a solution all in itself, because the more conversations that are happening, the more likely we're all going to do something about it. If I've gotten you interested enough that you think you might want to be a messenger or influencer, even just within your field in the hospitality, we welcome you. We can help train you to get the right information on how to be an effective communicator. You may be going to meetings in other parts of the state. We would love to have you help share the story. Or you may be somebody who could fit into an influencer idea. People that are doing more things on, their community members, they may be able to draw attention to some issues and maybe to a slightly different audience. We would love to talk with you about it. And please talk to me after we're done about training and any materials that we can get to you. Speaker's note, encourage community leadership from all angles, not just the typical leaders. Someone's going to pop up from this audience and go, I want to help. I really appreciate you guys having me here to speak. We know that future generations depend on the decisions and the plans that we as a group make today. So thanks for having us here. And I hope we can keep this conversation going. And I will leave you with my contact information, and I will be available to talk with you after the rest of your meeting. Erica, thanks for letting me take up some time in your quarterly meeting. Speaker's note, follow through with the group after you leave. You've started a conversation and that needs to continue. Okay, back to Nancy voice. So this presentation was really just an example. As you go through your messenger training, as you really start getting to know your audience, you're going to customize your presentation to match the other audiences. And again, I keep saying, but refer back to the communication toolkit for more in-depth information and recommendations on your target audiences. I do also note that chances are most of the people that are on this already have connections with members of these audiences through your personal, through the professional networks. We're going to share an editable version of this sample presentation for you to use as just a skeletal to customize. This entire presentation is going to be posted on the OOST website along with part 1, the communication plan. And with that, Nettie, I will see, are there any other questions while we wrap it up?
I don't see any questions in the chat, but opening it up now to anyone who has thoughts.
Okay, then with that, I think we have covered our implementation plan. I think we're done. Is there anything else that you want to share, Leaf, as we wrap it up?
No, I don't have anything I can think of. I just want to say we appreciate it and thank you for the hard work. So yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.